Hi, my name is Wyatt White. I'm the Education Director and the Product Manager at Beadalon. Today I'll be showing you a technique with fancy square wire and half-round wire. I'll be showing you a basic technique on how to wrap a cabochon and make it into a pendant. Today we're going to be wrapping this labradorite 30 by 40 millimeter cabochon. We're going to be using the banding pliers, round nose pliers, chain nose pliers, and flush cutters. For this project, I'm going to use the 20 gauge fancy square German style wire. German style wire is a copper core wire that has been silver plated, and this fancy wire is 3 pieces of wire that's been twisted and then forced back into a square shape. You always, whenever you're going to set a stone or any type of wire wrapping that requires a stone of some type, whether it be a faceted stone or a cabochon, you need to be able to build a structure that will have both a bottom and a top to hold the stone in. And I like to use the fancy square because it's fancy, basically. It gives you a lot of shine. And with your fingers, just sort of straighten the wire out. A lot of people will use other types of pliers for this. I like to use my hands because you kind of get a feel for the wire, and you can straighten it out nicely, and it doesn't take that much to get it straight. And a general rule of thumb for measuring, I'll take the stone and just set it up on edge like this, and then very carefully roll without letting the stone slip all the way around to kind of get an idea of your total length. So that's about 4 1/4 inches. The wire comes in a pack size large enough that you can make several. This particular pack is 2 meters. So we're going to need 4 1/4 inches plus. I like to have at least 20 to 50% extra, just so that you have plenty of wire at the end to be able to make the ends. So on this particular project, we're going to go double the length. So I'm going to go 8 inches. Take your flush cutter and make a snip. And I'm going to be using 3 pieces of the square wire. So we'll need 3 pieces straightened of 8 inches. So a lot of people ask why you use square wire. Square wire, once it's set next to other square wires, gives it a nice solid piece of wire. And the more you increase the number of strands, the stronger the wire gets, and that's what gives you the base of your jewelry. So these are going to be held together by half-round wire. So the half-round wire I'm going to use on this one, and again, it doesn't matter which half-round you use with which square wire. The important thing is that you're getting the look that you want for the stone. This is a large stone, so I'm using larger wire because the stone, for my particular taste, I like to have big wire with big stones. You could have the opposite if you want. It depends on what you want to highlight. Highlighting the stone with bigger wire means the stone's going to get a little bit less look, and if you use small wires, the stone will have a bigger look. So now I'm going to make 4 cuts of the half-round wire. The half-round wire doesn't really have to be straightened, but I just kind of always straighten the wire anyway. So here I'm going to cut probably about 3 1/2 inches, and I need 3 of these. And this is where our banding pliers are going to come in. You can bend these by hand around the 3 square wires, but we've created a plier that does that for you. It has 2 different diameters. This particular plier is made for 20 gauge and 21 gauge square. What that signifies that if you're using square wire and you're going to use 20 or 21, in this case I'm using 20 gauge, I'm going to bend the half-round wire on the 20 gauge side, and you place the half-round wire flat side up into the banding plier just like this. Make sure the flat side's up, and then you compress. I like to push that to get it, and that puts a nice square the size of 20 gauge. So you're basically making these bands that you're going to then wrap around the wire. So again, push that up, And we've got our 3 bands that are going to hold this whole business together. Just like so. Okay. Now, because I've made 3 of these bands, that means there's going to be 3 places that there will be a wrapped section. For this pendant, instead of setting it the normal way like this, I'm going to set it to the side. So we straighten these, get them all together, and about the middle, you're going to slide this right here. You're going to take your chain nose pliers and squeeze from top to bottom, and that should hold it together. And you're going to pull this up and push this down. That's what gets the first really tight wrap onto these wires. Make sure you're in about the center. The first wrap will be pretty easy to slide. The rest of them should not be. And then you're going to just nudge this and bend this over and tighten. Then bend it over once again and tighten. Your design is really up to you of how many times you want to do this wrapping. Some people like fewer wraps. I happen to like fewer wraps when I'm using this fancy wire. So as we get that nice and tight, you'll notice this now cannot be moved. The fancy wire helps that because it has all these ridges on the side, so that's going to hold it together nice and tight. Now, once we have, I'm going to go 3 wraps, and if it's not quite tight this direction, just nudge it there. Then you're going to take the flush cutter and cut flush here so that you can lay these 2 fingers, if you will, down on the back side. And take this just like that, nice and tight, and do the same thing right here. Okay, so that's your first band. Now, we need these bands to be roughly on the sides of the curved points of this. So there's a couple of ways you can do that. You can roll it and measure it again, or you can eyeball it. And I'm kind of an eyeballer when it comes to that. So we're roughly there. And now we're going to do exactly what we did before. I want to mention that the banding pliers are only used for that first bend, but that also allows the square part of the wire to be the right size for that. Pull that down, pull this up, and then squeeze. And I'm not putting a lot of pressure on this, but I'm getting it to just lay down there nice and tight. All right, so we're going to take this one, do the same once again. And every time you make a partial bend, tighten that bend. I almost made the mistake that I sometimes mistake. You want these fingers to all be on the same side, and that's going to be on the inside of your stone. So just remember that you need all those on the same side, and I didn't do that here, but you just pull that back up. Tighten this. Snip this with the flush side down again so that you don't have a sharper edge. And tighten that down and tighten this down. And then we have 1 to go, and this should be approximately the same distance from the center. And this becomes just a really rote thing. Once you have the bands made, you can just roll right along. Again, be aware of which side you want those fingers to be bent down. And you can wrap all on one side or do a combination of both. I kind of like to wrap both sides so you get a nice tightness on each side of the first band. Now we're going to snip these off. Okay, now we have the banded portion, and we remember for those fingers to be on the inside. And then we can just kind of start to bend this in the basic shape of the cabochon. And this takes a lot of nudging, if you will, to get this just right to where it's going to fit the cabochon. Just kind of bend it and rebend it. Get those up a little bit. Okay, now we're getting a little bit of a better fit. Now we've got to bring the top over and just bypass these so that they're not getting in each other's way. They're a little fitting. And you don't have to be so careful about this portion because we're going to be able to do some bending to kind of tighten it up. You can use the pliers, but be very careful that you don't mar the surface too much. Just kind of use them to get that shape just right. Now we need to grab this in approximately the center at the top and bend these about straight up. And then flip this over. And this is kind of the tricky part. You want these to come together, but because it's wire and it's bending, you can usually make it work even if you've kind of missed it a little bit. So we want to bend that straight up as well. So you can see what we're doing is we're trying to get this to just be nice and tight right there. All right, so we're pretty close. So the reason I use the 3 wires is because the bottom wire is going to become the base to hold the stone in, and then the top wire will come across the stone to hold the stone from the top. We're going to bend the bottom around and kind of get it to where it's seating the stone properly on the bottom, and then we'll work on the top. And then we'll slide the stone in and then capture this and do a few more things to get that working properly. So on the bottom, there's a number of different things you can do. I like to just kind of grab a hold about here and just twist and bend just the bottom one in like so, and then grab and twist this one in like so. See, so that kind of builds a little base for this stone to sit in. And we want to do the same on the other side, and obviously with a stone that is not clear, it doesn't really matter what you do on the back, but again, it's jewelry, so you want it to be as pretty as you can. So try to make it as symmetrical as you can. So that's got that seated there. Now you can see what that does on the back. And this is probably a good angle to see how nice the fancy square wire looks, especially on a stone like this. All right, so we have that. Now on the front, I'm going to do a smaller opening. And make sure you're just bending that top wire. And then we're just going to pull this slightly in the center, hopefully, to bring that up. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side first. What we have to do, because the stone is thick, we're going to have to angle this top one up and out to be able to accept the stone properly. But I just want to get it bent to where we have approximately the same look on the front. Okay. Now that we have this, we can take and open this up and bend this up to allow room for the stone to properly seat. And it does take a little practice to get this right, but the wire is not that expensive, and you just have to kind of play with it once you figure out what exactly you're doing. All right, so that's pretty much what our front is going to look like. I may want to change the angle of these. I think I want a little bit of a point here just to make it something a little different. So we've got that, and then on the back we have this. So the stone is really holding in there well. With the addition of the wrap up here on the top, it's going to hold pretty well. So I'm gonna have to do a by the hand wrap on the top, because it's a 2 square wire by 3 square wire, and these banding pliers only allow you to do a single wire. So what you've got to do is make a by hand square down on the bottom, approximately the same size as 2 pieces of square wire. The best way to do that is just to bend one and then test it on 2. And not too bad for the first shot. So just put that in there, seat it, then carefully gather the 2 by 3s, making sure they're all lined up. I've got some curves in the end making this a problem. So straighten all these wires up. Get this to where you've got the 2s by the 3s. And this is usually the most challenging part. Here we're going to pull these apart just like we did before, only now it's holding 2 by 3. Straighten these up a little bit, and when we tighten, we'll be able to get this nice and tidy finally. Again, we're just tightening. Each time we make a quarter of a turn around this group of wires, that just tightens it even a little bit more. Okay, and I've left some space here because we're gonna bend one of each side, one of these down, and then in the back we'll probably do something very similar to what we did down here. So let's take the bottom side and do that. You got to push the stone sort of down so you can grab and then twist, and then grab and twist this one straight down. And make sure you just have that on this side, the bottom wire. Now we've got a nice holder in the back. In the front, we won't need as much, so we're going to try to slide this down and take another wrap. Now for the front, again, we're going to have to pull this up. So I'm just going to sort of pull it up with my fingernail, just like so. I think I'm just going to pull the very center. Here you can get really fancy or just kind of do plain. This stone has so much going on that I don't want to overpower it with wire stuff. So we're just going to kind of bring this up and hopefully get it, again, symmetrical. Our stone's a little bit twisted, but we can shift it just a slight bit. Okay, so now we've got our stone set. It's actually not going to go anywhere at this point. So we just need to tidy up these and figure out what we're going to do with the bail on the top. This is going to be a pendant, and this is where I always have a problem. A lot of times I'll have several of these that are unfinished because I just can't decide what to do with the bail. And sometimes it's good to just set it aside and like think about it for a day or two and then go back to it, and that usually decides what you want to do. These things can be, the square wires can be turned down. Each one, just presume for a minute that that's one of these wires coming up here. You can cut them off like this and take a round nose plier and just curl them down and under, and they look really nice at the top of the bail, because we've got 6 wires and we really only need 2 of the wires to make the bail. We could use 4, we could use all 6, but it's sometimes kind of fun to put like a nice little frill right here at the top. So I'm thinking on this one we're going to do the little frill. So I'm going to pull this wire, front wire out on the left, front wire out on the right, and we're going to curl this under. So I'm going to flatten this, cut this off, and flatten that. And then I'm just going to cut probably about 3/8 of an inch. And I measure from the top of the band and come up here to about 3/8 of an inch and snip that. We want to do the same thing on the other side so that these two are the same length. That makes it easy for you to get these wraps, and for some reason it didn't come out right, so you gotta eyeball this and cut it a little bit shorter so that they're even. Measure twice, cut once, which of course is not what I did there, but so now when you bend this down, you can kind of get an idea of it. It sort of gives it a regal look. You may need to do a few little adjustments here and there to get it to do what you want it to, but it's wire, so you can always make it do what you want it to. Okay, now we want to make a bail. And so I'm going to pull the back one on the right side back and this one forward, and do the same with this on this side. So when we make our bail, first you need to decide how big of a chain you're going to put it on. It's always better to make the bail bigger so that you can get a clasp on a big chain or something like that through. Now they make tons of different pliers that you can do this with. Again, you can see I'm just doing it with my fingers. You may need to use pliers at first, but once you get the hang of it, it's pretty easy to use your fingers. So if you notice, I've now done this with the wires on the top. They're gonna help hold one another together. And you can see that bail is going to be pretty large. But you can always change it to whatever size you think you might need. And now I'm going to kind of gather these and make sure they're all in the square. Now we're going to take another piece of the half round wire, and because this time we have a 1x4, I'm able to use the banding pliers again. And you want to cut a fairly short piece of wire, about 2.5 to 3 inches. Band it in the very center on the 20 gauge side, because we're still using 20 gauge square wire. Place this right in the center. Do that. Now we're going to collect all 4 of these wires on that band. Hold this nice and tight. I've got some of these a little bit curving and twisting, so I'm going to try to repair that right now. Just grab this and square it up with the rest of them. The same with this one. You want it square so this band will hold them nice and tight. Okay. Just get them in the end of the band, just push it so it's nice and tight, and then pull and then push. Now you have to go all the way around and through the bottom, so just get a couple of wraps on here and get it tightened. And then one of the tricks to getting the longer wires through is just bend it and push it through like that, so you're not bending it too much. And then squeeze that, and squeeze here. And again, this is the same technique we did before, but now we're doing it with a 1x4 of the wires. And on the top, we're going to leave these. The fingers are going to be up because you don't want anything to get in the way of the chain sliding through. And it's always, you always want to tidy the ends in one way or another that pleases you or your client or whoever you're doing this for. So we're going to cut this off. So one of the things that's fun to do on this type of thing is to bend these up, which also helps to lock it in place. And then you can do a double heart on the top. The first thing you need to do is get everything cut to the same length. So the shortest one will cut everything to the shortest one. And then we're just going to bend this down and bend that one down. Okay, so we're not going to make a heart. Sometimes it changes. We have too much banding going on here, so we'll just make little loops on the top as well. Just make them all pretty close to the same, or as close as you can get them. And that is your wire wrap using half round and fancy square. And you've got a nice big loop. This could be made into a hook, so you could hook it on things. It could be a smaller loop. You can just do just about anything. So the most important thing is to know that you need to have a backing that will hold the back of the stone, and then you need to have these 4 on the front, or however many you choose. You could have chose to band several more times. That just gives you less amount of wire in between the bandings to be able to come up and over the stone. So there you have it.